Hello everyone, Simon Jacobson here. Today's 9/11, so welcome to our weekly Sunday afternoon conversation, I like to call it. 9/11, rebuilding the Twin Towers in our lives. This program is dedicated by Isaac Weiner in honor of the 81st birthday of his dear mother, Gittel Bas Esther. So most of us old enough to remember 21 years ago today, the images that remain etched in our minds. It was New York time, a little around 9 a.m. I remember it vividly, seeing those two towers smoking, and then of course the collapse of one tower and then the next tower. The images of the planes striking them. The other attacks, the plane that was downed due to the heroism of the passengers over Pennsylvania, the other one that hit the Pentagon. In many ways, the world did change after that, though New York rebuilt greater than ever. In many ways, we became stronger, but it brought home the reality, which, thank God, has been kept at bay, if almost eliminated, of true terrorism that until then was only a reality in the Middle East, in Israel, in other Middle Eastern countries, but not on these shores. I remember as a teacher and a speaker and a communicator that after that, the interest in understanding the dynamics, historical dynamics, of the wars fought, the battles fought between Islam, Christianity, Judaism, through the centuries, suddenly became extremely popular. Everybody wanted to know about them. And even till this day, what was suddenly came to the surface was that religious war is not just a thing of the past. Now again, thank God, we've not had another attack like that. And in general, things have been a lot better, at least in a very prominent way. The issue is not over because religion still has a very tenuous relationship with this secular world. And Christianity, after a while, did get tamed. And we have countries like the United States and European countries and others that are based on, was founded by Christians, and yet they discovered how to find a balance between their religious beliefs and a world that may be antithetical to those beliefs. How not to attack it, how not to go to war with it, but find ways to integrate. I'm not suggesting this issue is solved, but that's not what I want to address as much something much more important. And that is on a personal level, what we derive and what we learn from all of this. Everything has a lesson in life. I remember when the Twin Towers were first built in the early 70s. So it was considered a big feat. I think they were the tallest buildings in the world at the time. Windows to the world was the expression. There was the rooftop there that people went to. And I remember there was an advertisement for it, which ended up being quite tragically fulfilled in a strange way. The advertisement was inviting people to go up onto the rooftop, the restaurants there, the views. And it was somewhat tongue-in-cheek, and it said, it was a bird's eye view, a picture of the rooftop of the Twin Towers, and it said, the closest some of us will ever get to heaven. Which fed on that type of thing that so many people know they may not be going to heaven, but this is the closest some of us will ever get to heaven. Now, as I said, that was in 1972. In 9/11, it was fulfilled tragically for people who ended up their lives being taken that day. So it's far from a joke at this point. But still, what remained with me was the idea that we live in a material world. We build skyscrapers, and they're called skyscrapers for a reason. They scrape the skies, and we are very proud of our achievements. The building of the Titanic was another example, and it also went down. This is not a justification, God forbid. Every person that dies in any tragedy especially of such proportion, is a tragedy for all of us. But there's something to be learned about the fact that even when we build human structures, they're not invulnerable. What do they say about the Titanic? The Titanic was built by professionals. The Ark, that is Noah's Ark in the Bible, was built by an amateur, Noah. That there is a need to balance spirit and matter in our lives. And that's what I want to talk about. I did a lot of research after 9/11. I wanted to know, where did Osama bin Laden and his cohorts get their ideas from? Why do they feel the need to attack America in such a blatant way? And when you read the writings that influenced them, you find that it came from a very spiritual place, but completely distorted. There was a Muslim radical, one of the fathers of radical Islam of our times, who influenced them extensively with his philosophies. And the philosophies were that Islam came to bring peace between God and this universe. And the Western world, including the Christians and including the Jews, have essentially hijacked God for their own materialistic gains. And Islam has come to realign the fulfillment of that purpose. Okay, so far sounds, a blanket attack on Christians, on Jews is one thing, but there's at least a philosophy there. But then he goes on to say that even war and attacking the Western decadence is very much part of the jihad that needs to be held, that needs to be led in a war of God against the crass materialism and selfishness of a corrupt Western world. And that's, of course, where it goes the wrong direction, including with a virulent anti-Semitism that you could see coming from his lips. This attracted bin Laden as a young man, as many other young people looking for a passion, for idealism. Now, what's wrong with the argument? What's wrong with the argument is the same thing that's wrong when the Crusaders felt that the only way to transform the world is through the sword. Threatening people, either convert or die. What we learn from Abraham in the Bible is that there is a challenging relationship between matter and spirit, between matter and energy, between faith and modernity. But the way to resolve it is not through war, it's through inspiration. So the battle, even though it's rooted, and the root of the argument can be a legitimate one, that materialism can be a contradiction to and stands for antithetical values to what we'll call spiritual values. So the argument may be correct, but the way to resolve it is not by bringing down the pillars and the Twin Towers that represented Western civilization or the successes of Western civilization in New York, the capital, you can say the financial capital of the world, or the capital in many other ways of the world. The way to do it is to show an example how we transform materialism, not destroy it. That is the key thing to remember. Now, spiritual thinkers have always struggled with this issue, that when you're standing for higher values and then you see people who in their own self-interest can corrupt themselves and others, using the words of the scouts in the Bible. It's a land that consumes its inhabitants, so we need to go to war with materialism. And there are many schools of thought that way, that the only way to find spiritual harmony is to escape from the rush hour of Wall Street and all the forces of money, power, politics that corrupt the soul. Others felt it's a necessary evil. Think of the Protestant work ethic. Let's figure out a way to compartmentalize and some way manage the two. And then there's the approach, which is the key, is to realize that these two worlds all come from one God, from one higher reality that is neither matter nor spirit. And the way you relieve the tension between the material and the spiritual, between the immanent, between survival and transcendence, is not by one destroying the other or one annihilating the other, but rather by spiritualizing matter itself. In the words of the Kabbalists, everything in the material world has spiritual sparks. And it's our mission, our job, is to spiritualize the material. And you spiritualize the material by using matter for good ends. You make money? Great. But make sure you give charity. Make sure to build beautiful things with the money that you make. You're eating a meal. You're taking a walk. Everything has spiritual opportunity within it. And when you align the material life in your material life with the divine, with the spirit, that's when we create a full integration. So instead of attacking the Twin Towers and the symbolism of it, it is harnessing it and channeling it toward positive things. That's the big mistake that often a religious radical will make. Dogma. Instead of love, through inspiration, love, transformation, you go to war, physically or spiritually, and that's not the goal. The goal is to integrate the two. So how do we respond to it? Besides, obviously, the need for defense and protection, and in many ways, our airports and our air travel and so much of life has changed due to 9/11, all the protections and all the security that we need to go through. That's basically keeping an enemy at bay. Just protecting, that's defense. But the greatest defense is offense. And offense is to build even more powerful pillars, to build the spiritual twin towers in our lives by directing all our strengths and our economy and our successes, technological and scientific breakthroughs, toward spiritual goals. So there are indeed twin towers in our personal lives. You may have heard me speak about the spiritual spa, which is actually 3 pillars upon which the world stands. So let's move 2 to 3, but it starts with 2. What are the twin towers? And then the 3rd pillar. So the ethics of the fathers tells us that the world stands on 3 pillars. What are they? One is cognitive conditioning, study, spa, a spiritual spa, just as the body needs nourishment and exercise and nutrients and reinvigoration, so too does the soul, so the study. The second is prayer, which is emotional conditioning. And the third is good deeds, action, SPA, study, prayer, action, spa. And that is behavioral conditioning. So in our lives, the 2 main forces that drive our lives consciously are our minds and our hearts, our cognitive and our emotions. Both are necessary. But if the emotions don't have cognitive direction, we will be impulsive, reflexive, and often driven by just self-interest. The mind, the reflective mind, the second pillar, is there to counter and say, 1 second, think it through. On the other hand, the mind without a heart is equally as a computer. It's not life. Life plays itself out on the emotional level. And together, these 2 pillars lead to the third one called action, behavior, where we actually actualize it in good deeds, in kindness, in gratitude, in generosity, in charity. So when we see these 2, we see a so-called religion, or in the name of religion, as distorted as it may be, attacking the material world, the Western world, claiming that it's decadent, corrupt, antithetical to God, our response is not just don't attack us. No, we have something even more powerful than you have, and that is a deeper understanding of how we use the material world. And we rebuild the pillars, and even greater ones, but keeping in mind that we need to include the most important part of it is the soulful, the spiritual component of these pillars. So in our personal lives, it's about every day focusing on something that use your mind to read or to think or to study about something transcendent, a spiritual book, something that inspires and gives you a perspective that is beyond just things that are matter and material and survival oriented. or self-interest oriented. The second thing is saying a prayer. It could be a poem, it could be a song, something that touches your heart in the same way. And the third is doing something every day. This is not about how long you do these things, it's about the consistency of making it routine. That's how we build the pillars of our lives. So I would submit, with all the memorials and all the commemorations and honoring those that were taken from us, and also strengthening our morale and strengthening our resolve to not in any way be intimidated by others. Above all is to build the pillars in our lives. What better way to honor those that died on that day? To say, your death was not in vain. Obviously, we all would have preferred life without that tragedy. But once it's happened, we will rebuild the pillars that you suffered from. We will rebuild pillars that will reclaim, double and triple our efforts in the foundations that really make a world stand in the most permanent possible way. At the end of the day, every building can fall. Over time, everything erodes, everything perishes. The things that don't are the spiritual values of our lives, because spirit is not subject to the elements, and not subject to human attack. Those things remain intact forever and ever through ourselves and the legacy we live for our children and our grandchildren. So what better way to eternalize and immortalize everything that happened on that day, 21 years ago today, by building those pillars? 2, 3. Add one, which is always the positive way of increasing, and that is the best offense. That offense is the best defense possible. Because in addition to everything we need to do on a defensive level, and I'm not dismissing that, ultimately that's short term. Long term is building a world that stands on these pillars. Imagine 8 billion people on this planet. Whether they're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, of faith, of no faith, men, women, children, all embracing these pillars, which are the universal pillars that really are the basis of every civilization. That should be the real commitment of 9/11. Turning that sad day into a source of such powerful strength, of resilience, permanent pillars, permanent towers that permeate each part of our day, that permanent every day and each part of our day with these eternal values. May the people who did die on that day, may their souls rest in peace. May they elevate where they need to elevate. May they give strength to the families that survived them. And may we use all the pain and the grief and channel that into building something even greater. And I don't just mean the building, they built the Freedom Tower, but something even greater, which really represents the ultimate freedom, the freedom of spirit and power of transcendence, of spirit over matter. This has been Simon Jacobson. I thank you for listening. I'd love to hear feedback, thoughts, comments, suggestions. And please share this with others. What better way to honor this significant day and by building and rebuilding and committing to transforming the world and ultimately the total fusion of matter and spirit in a world of peace, a world that is filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. Thank you so much. Check us out at meaningfullife.com with a full array of programs and offerings, a calendar of different events, and both articles, audio, video, and be blessed. May God bless you, God bless America, God bless all people in the world with this critical message.